Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
This is a true story from a friend who served in the Army not too many years ago. During a training rotation, his unit was sent to Washington State for an exercise. Trained for recon, this soldier and his unit of 6 were sent out into a thick forest one night to scout a simulated enemy position. As the 6 men worked their way through the forest, they began to feel a sense of dread building. Soon the hairs began to stand on the backs of their necks and their hands trembled uncontrollably. It was at this point that they felt something stalking them through the forest. When the unit stopped to listen, they would hear the sound of something large moving through the brush come to a halt and go still. When they moved out, they would hear the sounds of movement begin again as something large kept pace with them. The soldiers tried to shake their shadow. To no avail. They had no ammunition, so they dare not set a trap for their hidden stalker. And while they increasingly reached their wits' end, they could clearly see the branches being pushed as something spied on them from as little as 20 feet away. Soon enough, the group abandoned their mission and beat an immediate retreat to their base camp, the stalker following behind closely until it faded away close to home. The 6 men went to their commander and told their story. What scared the men the most was the sudden fear in the officer's face. The next night, the unit was sent out again to complete their mission, but this time each man had been issued live rounds for their weapons. Me again. Another true story from Oregon this time. I posted this in another thread some time ago. This occurred somewhere close to Crater Lake National Park. An older man and his grown son were traveling home with a loaded horse trailer in tow. As so often happens after a long drive, both men felt nature call. There were no rest stops or gas stations close by, so they pulled to the side of the deserted road to relieve themselves. They spaced out about 10 paces from their truck and got down to business. Just as they were finishing, they both saw the most unusual and alarming sight. About 50 feet ahead of them and at the bottom of the embankment, a figure emerged from the darkness. To say it wasn't human was an understatement. Standing on 2 legs and covered in a thick gray fur, it peered at them over a tall bush and swayed back and forth eerily. It made no sound as it seemed to sway around the bush toward them. As it did so, both men were hit with a gut-clenching terror, and without a single word they both had the same instinctive thought. They were going to be killed in the most gruesome way and devoured. No sooner had this realization hit them that several more creatures began to appear along the length of the embankment, swaying and spreading out to surround the 2 men. As one, both men turned and bolted for the truck while the screams of the horses filled their ears. Their pursuers made no sound. The younger man looked back and saw the figure closing on them. The older man opened the driver's side door and let his son leap through to the passenger seat, then jumped in himself, with the creatures only yards away. The older man floored it. They felt a thump and an unearthly shriek as a creature was run over by the trailer. Both men did not look back as they drove as fast as they could to escape. Since then, both men have avoided the area, though they would go back with a large enough group and enough firepower to defend themselves.
Nothing amazing, but likely truer than the rest of the stuff here. Landnav Training in northern Florida. Camp landing or something. Pitch black, groups of 4 together. Potter driving on dirt paths on ATVs everywhere to check on us. Crickets and frogs chirping, night birds doing their usual night calls. Gets unusually louder. Gets so loud it starts to hurt, my buddies notice it too. Chirping goes for like 3 minutes, seems forever. We can barely talk to each other. Goes dead quiet in a snap. It's a relief, so we're more content than concerned. 5 minutes go by, we find a landnav point. We notice it's still dead quiet. Buddy mentions it usually means a predator is around. We don't care. We have red lens flashlights and rubber ducks. Training M16S. Another buddy asks, do you hear that? Low grumbling, rolling our sound. Notice we've heard it since the chirping stopped. Sounds like it's in our head and at different points around us simultaneously. Camp landing is in the middle of nowhere. No machinery, buildings near the landnav point. We get concerned, not sure whether to continue on or go back to the SP, starting point. Talking back and forth for a few seconds, we then hear a bullhorn blast 3 times. Potter announce over loudspeakers for all cadets to return to the SP immediately. Double time it. We didn't give a shit and felt badass with our fake M16S, so we just half-assed jogged back. Along the way, flocks of birds are taking off in a panic all around us. Start to get concerned. so we start picking up the pace. After about 10 minutes of jogging, we see the floodlights of the SP and multiple high-powered flashlights zooming around the SP. The entire time the cadre were frantically ordering all cadets back to the SP, each call more frantic than before and increasing in frequency. We arrive, almost all lights on us. We're blinded and can't see. Here.
That's them, just 4 right. It's just 4. Count them, should be 4. I don't see another. I don't see another.
Seriously concerned now. Rumbling sound behind us in the woods. Cadre tells us we're the last to arrive. Do a quick head count, we get in cattle trucks. Newer deuce and a half. We take off, we left everything, including floodlights, tents, tables, vans, etc. at the SP. We drive back to the Hardball main road and continue at a fast pace to the staging area. Staging area has floodlights. We have to run guard shifts with stupid rubber ducks and a radio. Cadre does not fall asleep, stays awake till sunrise. Once sunrise hits, we go back to the SP to get our equipment. Everything knocked out, tents flattened, a wooden table collapsed, maps in crumpled messes. We pack up quick per orders and start heading to the main part of post. Entire time cadets are anxious because we had no idea what was going on. Everything was a frantic mess. Cadre seemed just as confused and nervous. As we're getting ready to head back south, the BC tells us we had to leave so fast because of an incoming thunderstorm. It was cloudy but no signs of rain, and it never did rain. I got scared when I heard other cadets talking about a rumbling noise in the woods all around them. And in some cases in their head. Kinda a lackluster story, but it was just weird, especially with the sound and how panicky all the cadre were acting.
Told by father-in-law. 1970s, Brazil, far down south. Father-in-law, from now on Marco, is in mandatory army service. Stationed at a useless place in a small town. They get called to close down the street, not further information. They seal the street but no one is quite there. Here's screaming coming from one of the houses, rest of the street is empty for all they can tell. Adult male runs out of said house screaming. Gets hit by a brick but manages to get out. No one knows where brick came from. One of Marco's buddies knows about a kid who is said to levitate stuff and throw it around. Marco decides to sneak in the house. Kid is sitting in the middle of the kitchen. Household objects and other random things flying around him and getting randomly thrown around. Nope's out of there. Should also add Marco doesn't drink, and is an avid atheist, claiming that's the only unexplainable thing he has ever seen.
On deployment, we had to patrol this little valley. The valley had a name on recon maps but the locals called it something else in Farsi that translated to something like grave pit. The story was that there was a village in the valley where ammunition was stored for the Mujahideen when the Russians invaded. They found the stores and demanded that the people turn over the Mujahideen. When they didn't, the Russians executed all the males in the village and tossed the bodies out into the sun to rot, then drove the women off. The locals said that at night, the ghosts of the dead would come back and claim the lives of anyone in the valley. Never was around the place at night, but I heard others tell stories about hearing wailing at night, or seeing spectral images on night vision cams that weren't there. Probably just ghost stories, but thought you'd like to hear about it.
I'll let you in a little tidbit. This is just outside a large country of my own, that is all. Sent out on a retrieval. Told to dress warmly. Leave the base in a chopper heading north. After a couple hours notice we were over snow. Realize how north we are. Finally land and move out. Freezing outside. It's 1:30 hours but light reflecting off snow, some visibility. We see a flickering light in the distance. Head towards the light. As we get to lights, find out it is a crash. Odd-shaped craft, egg-like. We joke that it is a UFO, but figure it's American. Enter inside. Large opening in back. Find badly burned and mangled bodies inside, too. I bagged them up. Couldn't tell what they looked like, their face was small but the back of their head was pretty round and large. About the size of a jockey. Finish bagging them. Told me to get rid of the vehicle. Rig it and leave. Head home. The oddest experience I have ever had in the military, and I have seen some crazy things. We ended up signing paperwork the rest of the night. Just the run-through.
I have some third-hand stories and one first-hand stories. I once heard a story from a credible source about our special forces encountering Greys in Vietnam. One of these incidents comprised an entire platoon of special forces soldiers coming across a landed ship as well as several Grey aliens sorting human body parts. The special forces engage, our bullets cannot penetrate their space clothing, and the Greys respond with directed energy weapons. The soldiers manage to kill a single Grey with a shot to the head and the rest flee into their ship and leave. Several men were killed and others severely burned. Don't ask me why the incredibly intelligent spacefaring alien race has bulletproof clothing but don't wear helmets or masks. The other story also involves Greys and is also third-hand. Apparently sometime in the 80s our government and the Greys had forged some kind of alliance or treaty. The Greys are purported to be performing genetic experiments and at this point are doing so with the cooperation of the US government at a large underground base in the west of the continent. This particular incident involved 25 of our scientists, who were apparently receiving instructions from several Greys. The only contingency of the meeting was that our military personnel not be armed. At one point during this meeting, one of our officers appears wearing his sidearm. The Grey immediately kills him. Apparently other soldiers watched this via a closed-circuit TV system and, enraged by the death, immediately stormed the meeting room. 56 Special Forces soldiers and 25 scientists are all killed by head wounds. I don't know if I believe the second one. The officer's mistake of carrying his weapon reeks of lack of discipline, and you would think the elite of our military would know better.
My co-worker built a house on an old battlefield. He literally built a house on an old battlefield where thousands died gruesome deaths. His relative is a mover and shaker who got a few newly available parcels as a political favor, and they built a house on it. On the battlefield. Needless to say, his house is haunted. All of the classical haunting phenomena plus humanoid shadows and whispers and the dogs going nuts. His brother-in-law is a cop basically from The Wire. A hard-ass no-bullshit cop in a dying post-industrial city. He left the house screaming and will not return. He said he saw faces in the shadows. It's so fucked up. He only told me all this because I picked up on his despair. He's despairing. The ghosts are driving him to desperation. But he sunk so much cash into building this house that he can't afford to leave. Stop it, ghosts. Stop haunting my friend William. He's a good dude and he doesn't deserve this.
I was stationed in a disused military base that was about to be decommissioned. I and my fire team were billeted in the former non-commissioned officers' quarters. The room itself was very basic, as one can imagine from an early to mid-1900s military base that was in disrepair. The layout of the room was as pictured to the left. This occurred from roughly midnight onward. I woke up suddenly, and had no reason to do so. No dream, no need to urinate, nothing. As I woke up, I saw from my position, red star, the shadowy outline and filling of a humanoid figure, orange star, of approximately 6'6" and at least 260 pounds. If this were a human male. From the outline I could deduce that he was wearing fatigues and a beret. I say he, because of the entity's height and stature. The lights in the billet were off, and the only light was from the moon, as shown in the picture, blue lines. He was in the brightest illumination of the moonlight and thus obviously not a shadow cast from outside, as previously there had been none. It also isn't possible that he was an internal shadow, as everything was stored either in footlockers or deployment bags, none of which are tall enough or even the correct shape. This figure stood over my friend's bed for hours and hours. I was just frozen in fear, I couldn't even make a sound. All of a sudden, at around 6 o'clock, before everyone awakened for the parade, it vanished. And when I say vanished, I don't mean like a shadow diminishing, just one moment there, gone the next.
My grandfather was in the Navy, and was an oceanographer and had lots of cool equipment from over the years. When he passed away, my relatives got whatever equipment he had. My uncle apparently got some sort of device that tracked the location of submarines in the area, and for years he would just casually watch these submarines. One morning when he was watching this device, he noticed a submarine was coming really close to the shore of California, which he thought was really strange. Then the submarine went past the shore, and into the inland of California, and just disappeared. Now my uncle doesn't really care about conspiracy theories or the paranormal, he just brushed it off as an error. Until a few days later, another submarine goes into California. Then it never happens again. He told me, because of this, he thinks there's a sea shelf that goes far into California. Not super far, but much farther than others, and there could be a hidden military base there. Eventually he moves and gets rid of that device. I'm not even sure what it was or called. I got told this many years ago, and only remembered it recently when an oil rig detected an earthquake off the coast of California that seismologists say wasn't natural.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.